Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, presented by the National Bicycle Dealers Association. This is where bicycle retailers, industry innovators, and advocates come together for real conversations about what's happening right now in bike retail, from cargo bikes to carbon fiber. Each episode explores the challenges you're facing, the opportunities ahead, and the people driving our industry forward. We go beyond the surface to uncover practical strategies, fresh perspectives, and authentic stories from shop owners who've been where you are. Whether you're navigating staffing challenges, adapting to market shifts, or looking for your next breakthrough idea, this is your community. Since 1946, the NBDA has been in the trenches with specialty bicycle retailers, providing education, advocacy, and connection when you need it most. Want to be a part of this community? Learn more about NBDA membership at nbda.com.
Discover Cat Trike, America's leading recumbent trike brand. Proudly manufactured in the USA. Cat Trike stands for exceptional quality and reliable dealer support. Our dealer terms are robust, ensuring a beneficial partnership. By joining us, you not only expand your product range, but also attract a new customer base. Become a Cat Trike dealer today and discover the difference. Contact us at info@cattrike.com. Cat Trike, where passion meets engineering.
All right, listeners, welcome back to Bicycle Retail Radio. I'm Heather Mason, Executive Director of the National Bicycle Dealers Association. This is our very popular monthly news hour episode powered by our friends at Human Powered Solutions. Every month, we're fortunate enough to get together and we break down what's happening right now in the bicycle and e-mobility industry. If you have not heard of Human Powered Solutions, we will link to their website in our show notes, but they are one of the most trusted consulting firms in our space. They work at the forefront of bicycle and e-mobility technology. They help with supply chain strategy and market intelligence. And the team at Human Powered Solutions has decades of experience. So today's conversation, it's one that every retailer, supplier, and industry leader should be paying attention to. Every month, we dive into the biggest challenges and opportunities impacting bicycle retail. We talk about emerging technologies, shifting consumer behavior, policy changes, and market trends, everything we're seeing currently that's going to shape the year ahead. The insight that we cover, the articles that we talk about, they come directly from the Human Powered Solutions Bicycle Business Reporter. This is their must-read monthly industry report. If you're not already subscribed, head over to humanpoweredsolutions.com and you can get this delivered straight to your inbox. Jay, Mike, Fred, welcome to the show again.
Thank you.
Nice to have you
Thanks.
here. Yeah. The March issue was impressive. So titled Bike Imports Drop, E-Bike Imports Remain Largely Unknown. Jam-packed as always. Seems to be a lot of constant change right now that's happening in the industry. So I thought before we got into the specific articles within the reporter, maybe if we could, as a group, each one of us, come up with a word, a single word, to describe what we think about the state of the industry. We're recording on April 1st, not an April Fool's joke. It is actually April 1st. So yeah, if we had to sum it up in one word, a single word about the industry right now, what would you say? Who wants to jump in first? Mike's like, not me. Come on, a single word.
Oh, I can jump in. I think the word that comes to mind is pensive.
Pensive.
Okay, there's so much going on. So much of it is, as Jay's fond of pointing out, is chaos. We don't know what's going to happen with respect to regulation. We don't know what's going to happen with respect to tariffs and imports. We don't know what's going to happen with respect to a lot of the issues associated with safety. We don't know what the states are going to do. We know what some states are doing, and it's quite frankly very scary. But then on the other hand, I think there's room for optimism with respect to the war in the Middle East. With respect, the last time we've seen this, where there have been significant constraints put on oil availability and gasoline prices, it's been a shot in the arm for our industry, especially for e-bikes, because people need to get to work. And if they can't afford $5 a gallon gasoline, and they don't have that far of a commute, an e-bike is a logical alternative. So I just, I'm anxious, I'm pensive. I don't know what's going to happen. Um,
I agree with
we'll
that.
see.
I like that word. Yeah, thinking of one word is a little challenging. I like that, Mike. What about Fred? You got one?
I do. So I mean, I agree with Mike, and he referenced Jay with the chaos. So my word was what to do about it if you're a bike dealer, and the word I came up with was not a new one, independent.
Hmm.
In a chaotic time, when you have a lot of unknowns, what are your strengths? And I think for a lot of the smaller companies and dealers, being independent is one of your superpowers. You can move, you can bob and weave, you can adapt to the market quickly. I think, and it's been that way for a long time with independent dealers. And I think the independence is one reason that dealers remain viable when other industries, retail and physical retail locations have really been challenged. And of course, we're challenged too, but independent, I like that.
I do like that. Yeah. Fred, good one. Jay, you got one?
I got one, and it kind of fits both what Mike has said and Fred. Apprehensive.
Ooh,
Uh, and again, my sense is, it's dealers, but it's also the overall market and what's occurring on the supply chain side, all the way up through and into the supply sources. Apprehensive, that means anxious, which Mike mentioned. Fearful, I think not everybody. We certainly have got some optimism out there, but I think the times are making people very apprehensive, and I'm hoping that in turn, in a positive way, as Fred said, independence, but also caution. That they're being cautious in developing conservative business planning, making sure that they are questioning everything. They want to negotiate everything as dealers, and that the industry as a whole is being very careful in its business planning going forward.
I like that. Yeah, I thought it would just be kind of fun. I was thinking of convergence, which maybe is kind of like the opposite of independent. But I feel like we have this merging of like bicycles, e-bikes, e-mobility, and then like NBDA, People for Bikes, the Bike League, trying to get alignment of our voices, policy efforts. There's a lot of market efforts and like it's all coming together, but maybe that's my optimism because I think we need that more right now than ever. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I could tell you though, from four different people, four different words, four different ways of looking at it. It's an interesting time here, April 2026. That is for sure. Yeah. I mean, just reading through the reporter, so many articles in there, lack of data, tariff issues coming down. Like there's just so much that we don't really have visibility on the future. And maybe that's a little bit of our kind of, yeah, apprehensive ness that we're feeling. But let's dive in. Anyway, thanks for doing that. I thought that would be kind of fun to kick it off. Um, well, I'll start right at the top. Bicycle retailer and industry news. There's an article, annual bike imports fall to the lowest number in at least a decade. And we talked a little bit about this in the last episode we did. The article just reports a significant decline in US bicycle imports, the lowest levels in decades, and the sourcing is coming away from China as we're aware of. So given how the US market really relies on imports, we're dependent. What does this sharp decline signal to retailers or signal to you guys as industry experts about what our future looks like as far as inventory availability, pricing stability, and just overall health?
Well, I think first of all, it's a situation where uh, imports are at the lowest level, and we are import dependent. So this is essentially our sourcing is at the lowest level it's been since prior to 2000. Our records that we're keeping and looking at are go beyond what brains were. They said about since 2019, 2020. We go back to 2000. I was looking at that chart when I looked at the headline when this originally came out. Um, and it signals all sorts of things. It's inventories are low in the United States, or are being suppressed at this point. I think also for retailers, it sends a clear signal that they are going to have to make sure that they are with their suppliers asking the question, will you be able to supply these models for me this year? And if the vendor says, I don't know, good. You're getting an honest response because this is a very chaotic situation. The supply chain shift from China is part of this. Chinese tariffs are the highest that we have experienced, upwards of 65% ad valorem, which is to the FOB value.
Yeah.
Some of that's being ameliorated by the old-fashioned cheating. I mean, there's still e-bikes coming into this country's electric toothbrushes, as an example. And that'll continue to occur until the import authorities in this country are clamping down on fraud. So they'll be making sure there's less of that. But there's also clever classification. There's ways that you can tap that down. But the simple fact is the tariffs are high and highest from China. So sourcing has shifted over to Vietnam, Taiwan, Cambodia are the next three largest supply sources. That tariff rate is up for grabs. The tariff rates for all countries, including China, were greatly affected when the Supreme Court ruled that the IEEPA tariffs or the reciprocal tariffs were illegal. And they threw them out. So, and I don't think people understand that the tariffs collected during that period under the IEEPAs was the largest amount of tariffs ever collected in the history of this country.
Wow.
And they're the ones that were declared illegal. So now there's this big fight over whether we're going to get refunds, separate issue.
Yeah.
But it goes to the point that you're getting at, Heather, which is I think dealers need to be very, very careful with their supply base. I think the fact that imports are the lowest they've ever been indicates low inventory. It indicates difficulty in getting product into the country or apprehension and brands not bringing product into this country to supply dealers.
Mm-hmm.
So at the dealer end, they've got to be asking all the time, every day, of their suppliers, do they have the product in stock? Do you have the SKUs that I'm going to need? If not, dealers, in order to serve the public, are going to have to make sure they're bringing in the brands that have said we can supply the product as we go through this year, and I think probably next year in the same conditions.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Fred, you are the director of the NBDA. You've worked with retailers, hundreds and thousands of retailers. As a retailer who maybe looks at Brain once in a while, hopefully we're looking at the publication more than that. Are retailers spending, like, in your opinion, should they be spending a lot of time looking at this, like practical day in, day out? Like, is this a needle mover? Or is it just being aware? And, retailers, a smart move is to open up lines of communication with your suppliers to make sure they have inventory, like just some practical, real world advice for the retailers that are looking at this information.
Well, I think with this, in the past, retailers choose suppliers for various reasons. Is there opportunity in your market? Is there saturation with other stores selling the same brand? What's their supply? What's the credit terms? Well, I think now one of those how to select a brand has got to be how are they navigating this import tariff situation? It's not like in the old days, you pay your whatever it was, 11% or 10.5% and 5%, and then you're done. There's not a lot of room for creative suppliering, but now there is, and so I totally agree with Jay. Communication is, and yet it's, are you going to get the true representation? I think it's just, is the supplier reliable? Do they have supply or not? At what price? That's, the retailer, I guess, has the luxury. It's not really a luxury, but we're not in there fighting with the customs people and trying to source product. That's what we pay suppliers to do for us, and choosing suppliers that do it well, I think is a real key part of being a successful retailer.
Yeah. I'm gonna be a little unhinged right now. Very authentic, Heather. You know, we followed up. We touched on this article last time we spoke, and the alarming thing was that it was kind of like a misrepresentation because we didn't have the e-bike data in the numbers, right? And so, no, I know Jay, you worked with Leva and some other organizations trying to get that data to Brain so we could have a more concise picture, but at the end of the day, to be quite frank, like the data doesn't exist. And you're telling me a couple of moments ago that e-bikes are being imported, but they're being recognized as like toothbrush or whatever. So they're coming in. Like, how do we not have accurate data? How are we supposed to make great decisions when we like why can't we get the data? Like, let's just dive into that a little bit more. It's kind of frustrating for me. Can you tell I'm a little boiled up about it?
Well, and I think in the coming months, as we head toward the summit in June, the NBDA summit, uh, I think we can begin to formulate the approach. So let me take the worst case from my experience over the years relative to import. Uh, Number one, you're correct. I reached out to both Leva and also to the Bicycle Market Research Group, both of which have tabled estimates, which is the only way you can do this for e-bikes. The problem in the past was that the estimates made more sense, and we as an industry bought into them. They were primarily from Leva. The big missing piece this year, we've had 20 years of estimates that have included units and dollars, which you can derive from the data available. This is import entries. This year, we've got two divergent numbers for e-bike units imported into this country. They are 1,320,000 and 2,200,000. That's a 40% delta, which is unacceptable. I mean, we just can't choose between them as far as I am concerned. It's too high and too low. But the bigger piece is no estimate of value
Mm,
from either organization. They were not willing to do it. They will not table them. We can't go forward with any kind of estimates because we can't look at what is the average FOB value if we don't have an overall estimate of the total import value of the e-bikes brought into this country. What I've suggested, and you and I discussed here, is that we put a full-blown press on the Congress and other agencies in the coming months to create a definite set of good human harmonized tariff schedule numbers, HTS numbers, under which e-bikes will be imported with the value declared, just as bikes are now. And right, wrong, or indifferent, Customs is going to monitor that and make sure we've got data that we in turn can quote going forward. We're not going to be able to make up the 2025 numbers, which we're missing now, nor this year. But that's fine, in my opinion, as long as we can get good, reliable numbers from 2027 going forward. We have been relatively assured by the U.S. trade representative, that is the trade representative from the bicycle industry that advises the U.S. Trade representative and the trade committees, that this is a reasonable approach, particularly if we do it in a way that will not impact the foreign numbers. That would be HTS numbers specific to the United States. And I think that's correct. We don't care about affecting any of the HTS numbers for e-bike data for the other countries of the world. We're worried about the U.S. And so if by next year, working this year on the lobbying effort, the latter half of this year on the lobbying effort, we can establish a set of good, solid, harmonized tariff schedule numbers, HTS numbers, to make sure that all the ambiguities go away and we've got as solid a set of numbers on the imports of e-bikes as we could possibly get to match up to what we've got on what's called acoustic bikes, which is what we've relied on for decades. Then I think we can move forward with more assurance as an industry, coupling that with domestic stats. What are the domestic production numbers, which we can also capture through the government stats. But at this point, the why of this, I don't think the industry's wanted these numbers to be public nor readily available up to this point.
Okay.
And I can get into all sorts of reasons for that, but I think we're past that time. We cannot live with that anymore. We can't get reliable estimates anymore. Let's not work with estimates. Let's get the best import data stats we can, and I think it's up to NBDA and then your alliance with People for Bikes and the League of American Bicyclists and anybody else who wishes to join in. And we can successfully lobby internally with starting with customs and then the U.S. Special Trade Rep, the USTR. I think we could successfully get a good, solid, reliable set of HTS numbers in place for 2027 and forward.
Yeah, you would think it should be priority. It's one of our fastest growing segments. So look forward to working with you and the other organizations on that. But then my follow-up, I had a podcast with Steve Frothingham a week or two ago. It doesn't even look like the e-bike numbers, when added, like the assumed e-bike numbers, did push the imports up. Is that correct, Jay? We're still on a decline?
Yes, yeah. The even at 2,200,000, it didn't push the import numbers up to the point where we gained. So we're still, if you look at it, anywhere from 1,320,000 to 2.2 million e-bikes added into the total that we posted, which was 8,540,000 acoustic bikes, was still the lowest that we've had on record in the last 20 years. So no, it did not help because e-bikes had not been a major contributor to numbers going back 10 years. And as they were starting to ramp up and replace the loss of the acoustic bikes, even very the very broad estimates that we've got from the two organizations this time around in numbers for e-bikes do not make up the dramatic drop that we've had in acoustic bikes.
Hmm. Mike, I feel like you're the e-bike guy. Like, we're always, going to Mike when we talk about safety concerns. Like, how does this sit with you, not having this data? Do you have any thoughts about this, or?
Just sharing the overall general concern with respect to having accurate information upon which to base business decisions. Again, when we do talk about safety and we do talk about all the regulatory action that's happening, good and bad, out there, it's a little bit frightening thinking that if we cannot continue to make the case that e-bikes in fact represent a very viable, very high utility transportation alternative to internal combustion engines and cars in general, we're losing the wind in our sails, if you will. And I think we need to be in a position to say, look, this is the best development in our industry for years and years and years, and if we can't accurately track what that means in terms of consumption in our country, I think we're kind of shooting blind. And so yeah, and it would seem to me that this is long overdue reform. This is an important governmental agency and a governmental function, and especially considering all the controversy that has come up with the recent activity associated with tariffs and trade and intergovernmental and international relations, not having an accurate source of reliable information is abhorrent. I mean, we need to make good decisions on the data, and we don't have the data. And Lord knows the technology supports it. As Jay points out, if we had appropriate HTS numbers, keeping track of these things would be a piece of cake. It's just, you scan a barcode or you log a form, into a database, and that database kicks out, meaningful information, and we all benefit from it. And the absence of that is a big issue.
Yep. And I think
I,
the others, go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to say that I think in terms of business planning, um, if you're a national company, national trends really matter to you. And what we're aiming for here is a national USA number, and so that they can note the trends and do planning. But if you're a retailer and your individual market is really what drives your planning, these numbers are important, but are they critical or are they critical adjacent? It's one more piece of data that you can consider. But as we all know, in certain communities, you go to a bike shop, it's mostly mountain bikes. Go to another city, it's mostly road bikes because the local market determines how you forecast, how you order. The one caveat is that we are at a critical time, and we'll get to this. We're at a critical time where the entire category of e-bikes is being challenged by government regulation
Yeah.
for safety, and of course, battery fires we've been on for a long time. Having reliable numbers to make the case to elected officials who have the power to put us out of business is really important. So I think in that it's critical, not critical adjacent. So that's my take.
Well, in the same vein, Heather and I found out, as did Mike, in talking about this issue in February at the NBDA Summit and the Cabinet Show, from the NBDA General Counsel, who we presented this discussion to or this situation to, we found out something we didn't know before. And that is, he said, this is critical because this is the import data, it's the information, the import data that the insurance industry uses to set rates. And he was very familiar with that from his practice and background, and became very, very first supportive when we explained this to him, and then started to delve into it in detail while we were there for those 4 days. But it was something that I didn't know, and I don't think, Heather, we'd connected the dots and association wise that your counsel brought to our attention, which is the insurance underwriters use this import data and the import domestic mix of product to set insurance rates,
Mm.
which do affect broad. And we've seen this with California dealers based on what Fred just said, which is the reaction of the states and the state laws and regulation.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot here, and let's just stay on e-bikes because there was an article, Electric was the source, titled "Why Another U.S. State is Preparing a 10 Mile per Hour E-Bike Speed Limit." And it really goes into Florida's proposed legislation limiting e-bike speeds in shared use areas, which is a growing national trend. We have like almost what I would say a patchwork of state to state e-bike regulations that are coming down. And the analysis just from your side, I think, raises a concern about the lack of this unified industry alignment when it comes to legislation. So, what do you think the industry should be doing right now? How can retailers play a role? I mean, what do you think about the proposed even e-bike speed limits? I guess more very general question, but we'll just open it up.
Well, I'll start with just to make sure the group is aware of what's called in the Congress of the United States, the Safe Speeds Act, which was just covered in Brain. Um, NBDA, although the article in Brain does not point this out, Heather, the NBDA took lead in this because the NBDA was the first to advise the sponsor of the bill, Representative Dave Min, MIN, from California, and worked with him for a month or more on developing this legislation. And then the co-signers came on board. And at that point, I believe after it became known, the other associations in the industry got involved in sponsorship. It's not in the hopper yet. There's no number assigned to it, but and I the name of the bill is not quite as descriptive as it should be, but the Safe Speeds Act um, is one that should be supported because this plethora of state regulation or state legislation that would lead to regulation, and it's getting down into, as you said about Florida, the speeds, uh, other ways of trying to regulate e-bikes. E-motos are the problem, and the injuries and accidents and injuries caused by the e-motos are the catalyst. But this legislation, when introduced, gets to be sweeping. And it encompasses everything, including bicycles, in some of the state proposals. So it's beyond at this point bad. It's terrible. It could serve to really put a real dent in both bicycle and e-bike sales in some states if it's allowed to move forward. And so I think, Heather, this is an absolute example, best example of why this industry needs alignment. We need to come together. And from a dealer standpoint, I'll make this simple. Dealers have to work with associations, particularly the NBDA, in contacting their local state representatives in their state legislature. And essentially, I think they've got to oppose everything that's out there except something like the Safe Speeds Act, which is described in the Brain article, and we can provide more information. But essentially, what we're talking about here is the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission has a definition of bicycle, which is inclusive of e-bikes. And suffice it to say that at this point, there is federal preemption if we push on that issue. And essentially, it would mean that what's called Class 1 and Class 2 are within the federal definition.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have to, as you've advocated, we need to make sure we define Class 3 because it's an outlier at this point. And we need to make sure we're regulating the e-motos. And again, our advocacy is regulate them under the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and regulate them as a motorcycle.
Hey everyone, it's Frances, and I want to talk about community, specifically the Canadian bicycle retail community. For years, Canadian retailers have traveled to our U.S. summits. You've told us you want something closer to home, something that speaks directly to your market. We hear you. The NBDA Retailer Summit Canada happens this year, July 29th and 30th, and it's built for you. Main stage sessions in the morning featuring Canadian retail leaders, interactive flow sessions in the afternoon where you problem solve with peers facing the same challenges. We're diving into what matters, exceeding customer expectations in the Canadian market, winning inventory strategies for your season, staff development, service center profitability, and the e-mobility opportunity in Canada. And here's what makes this extra special. Your distributors are already behind you. HLC, OGC, LTP, and Giant are supporting this summit because they're invested in your success. Registration is $250 for retailers or $200 for NBDA members, and just $175 for each additional team member. Visit nbda.com and register today. Summit Canada, this year, July 29th and 30th.
Yeah, there's a lot that we do need to do. We are meeting now monthly, the NBDA, with People for Bikes in the Bike League, and hopefully this alignment can get things moving in a more transparent, quicker state. And we're going to keep continuing to advise retailers when they need to act, but I'd rather we be more proactive than reactive.
So could I chime in here real quick?
Please do.
This is just Fred talking. This is that Class 3 never should have been part of the industry's agenda. It's in direct conflict with the CPSC. A 28-mile-an-hour bicycle is not a bicycle, it's an e-moto. And so go for your alignment, but Class 3 has got to go, in my opinion. We have, even within the industry, people disagreeing as to whether it should have a throttle or not, even with the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So I think, I don't think it was greed, really. Why would you put a 28-mile-per-hour vehicle in a bicycle class in direct contradiction with a CPSC? I don't know. Maybe it's because, the whole market's developing. You don't want to lose, high-speed commuters or whatever the thinking was. It just doesn't seem to fit to me. Now, that's just me again. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's created kind of a challenge, I'd say, for our industry, right? Like that's a nice way to put it, right? So if we had Class 3, if the Class 3 products were part of the CPSC definition of a bicycle, things would be much easier right now. So we do have some headwinds in front of us, that's for sure.
There's a whole other dimension to this issue, and that's from the user perspective. I mean, there is a groundswell of negativity associated with this class of product, even e-bikes. I mean, just coincidentally, I was in an Uber coming home a couple of weeks ago after the CABDA and NBDA summits in Las Vegas, and I'm in the back seat, and the Uber driver's pulling into my subdivision, and going running the stop sign. An e-bike and an e-moto, two kids on bikes, blows the stop sign. The driver almost hit them. And then I'm watching these guys as they drive away. We happened to turn in the same direction, but he had to make a left onto the street where I live. And as we're making that left turn and watching them ride off into the distance, the kid on the e-moto pulls a wheelie and he's riding down. Now, this was a residential street, not a lot of traffic, which is good, residential street, which is not good. And I get home and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I just witnessed the issue that we're dealing with here. But in the meantime, I'm seeing all sorts of support. I subscribe to a neighborhood alert app on my phone, and the frequency of citizens, of residents in the area complaining about kids on e-scooters and e-bikes and electric motorcycles breaking traffic laws, riding recklessly. We can regulate the product. We need to find better ways of instructing the users, though, in terms of safety, and that is one dimension of the NBDA efforts. Obviously, is proper education relative to safely using these products. But I mean, we can only do so much with respect to the product. It has to transition into safe use and care in the minds of the consumers.
Well, I think
It's
that leads to enforcement too. Fred, you're a motorcycle rider.
Well,
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. There's nothing inherently wrong with a vehicle that can go faster than 20 miles an hour, but in the motorcycle case, there's licensing, mandatory helmet laws in most places. You have to be trained. You have to have a driver's license, there's and registration and
insurance.
a VIN number, insurance to protect people. And so I don't there's nothing wrong with a bike shop selling a 28 mile an hour motorcycle. That's because independent, they can carry whatever they want. And maybe electric vehicles, all two wheels, motorcycles are not belong in bike shops, not in motorcycle shops. But in terms of consumer and consumer protection and the legal framework on which we operate, um, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Is it a great
Thanks,
conversation?
Fred.
We could spend the whole podcast talking about this. There's a
You
lot.
Yeah.
spend the whole day talking about it.
The other thing that it was from electric as well that really got my attention was just China now requiring the traceability on e-bike parts and batteries. There's a new safety reform. It's in my opinion, a major shift towards transparency, accountability. Do you think we're going to see something like this in the US, or might these traceability measures impact the US at all at this point?
It definitely, Heather, because recall, we haven't talked about it much lately, but a year ago we started the conversation relative to what Europe is doing with the product passports.
Or trans-
Virtually every key component, integrated into these products will have a unique identifier, and that identifier will link to a digital file in a database someplace that tracks it from birth to recycling. And so it's happening in Europe. It's mandatory in Europe, and because it's happening in Europe, and a lot of the products that are sold in Europe are also sold in the United States, at least pre-tariffs. It's going to start affecting us, and I think that's a great idea, because and again, my work ethic is I do a lot of expert witness work, and a lot of my job as an expert witness is oftentimes complicated because I can't see the paper trail relative to the origin of the product, and that's changing. And I think that's a great development. China is implementing it. Europe is implementing it. It's going to come here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
the
just
tra
for our listeners who aren't aware what the passport is, Mike, because I know you and I spoke of it. We might have mentioned it on a podcast before, but
And then we have a nice young lady who's a critical part of it in the European community, American. I apologize, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's been advising us relative to it, and she sent us a lot of information relative to its structure and implementation. So that's something that we need to revisit.
yeah, so that's April, right? And so it was just that
Yes.
batteries will now have a passport, so we'll know where the battery came from, where it's been, how long it's been out there. Yeah, it's Yeah, Jay.
whether or not it's been certified and certified to what requirements, and the test reports presumably would be available via the link. There's all sorts of valuable information relative to a product's pedigree becoming available.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Jay, were you jumping in or?
Well, it's just that the Chinese manufacturing, China's the source of manufacturing for the vast majority of lithium ion batteries for our industry, both for OEM and for aftermarket, or it's Chinese controlled, Chinese owned companies. So this is a welcome move because it means that this traceability that is going to be required in Europe will also be available in the United States. It's going to give UL this ability to do testing and certification and have batch numbers and have product numbers to work with. That will trickle down to the manufacturers, brands, and to the retailers. So
And
it facilitates.
Jay touched on a critical important issue, and that's traceability. I
Yep.
mean, there will come a day when we can identify a potentially defective battery pack and reach out to the people that have one, and call them up and say, "Hey, set that on your patio until such time as we can collect it and recycle it." But I mean, that's an incredibly positive development in our industry.
I mean, all right, so we also have the other article. Say it came out of electric still. The cheap e-bike maker who refuses a recall, and CPSC is telling riders to get rid of the product immediately. We got low cost, uncertified e-bikes. They're presenting a lot of reputational damage to the broad category. And so some of this traceability will help, right, for better products. But what do you guys think about the recalls that we're seeing and some of this low cost uncertified e-bikes? I mean, I think you could agree with me. We need to get them out of there, out of the space, right?
We
Well,
do.
sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, no, go.
No, I was just going to say I've been making the point at various presentations and whatnot in the relatively recent past here that our early suppositions and I've stood on a soapbox for years basically saying the same thing. Cheap batteries are dangerous batteries. But
Mhm.
I was saying that just based on empirical evidence, not scientific proof. And fortunately, those assertions that I was making back then are being validated through advancements in terms of non-destructive testing. That was always the issue. And I looked at a lot of burned batteries. There's not a lot you can conclude from that other than the fact that they burned. But it was very difficult to pinpoint the cause of the failure because the evidence was gone and we weren't quite sure what attributes associated with the battery pack made it susceptible to that failure. We know that now. We're identifying. We're able to put our finger on key manufacturing deficiencies or specification deficiencies that ultimately lead to those catastrophic failures. And basically what it's saying is yeah, the cheap stuff is dangerous.
Yeah.
We have to, and again, it's affordability is a big issue, obviously. The good news is that the cost of lithium battery packs is coming way down. I mean, the production capacity of lithium ion cells has just ballooned given the demand for these things for mobility applications, and that's driving prices down. And battery packs are cheaper today than they used to be. Good battery packs are cheaper today than they used to be by probably 35%, which are making them more affordable. So there's less rationale behind buying a cheap e-bike because it's a dangerous e-bike. Buy a good e-bike because the cost of the battery pack, a good battery pack, is coming down, and there's really no reason why we should get the cheap junk that will ultimately hurt us.
Right.
If that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
Of
Well,
course.
and this article actually goes to another issue, and that is the article itself is pointing out that under this administration, what Mike and I knew and what the industry knew is Section 15B is not being enforced. And that is this article states that under the new regulations, where we no longer have sitting commissioners, you got one appointed individual and you're going through a special office in the White House to make these determinations. I think they're doing a good job, but they are not they're not going as far as the CPSC that we knew last year and we knew under previous administrations could go. And that is if a banned hazardous substance if an e-bike or an electric lithium-ion battery were deemed to be a hazard, there was automatic recall. The commission could force a recall of that product. What we're seeing now is no, the brand or manufacturer has to agree before it is an official recall. All we can do is warn now. So this is a softening of the rules. And again, I think we need to be very mindful that if this isn't under control, that we've got to go and put pressure legally, both that and lobbying wise, on the administration to make sure that they go back to what the Consumer Product Safety Act actually says, which is Section 15B, is the CPSC making a determination that this lithium-ion battery and this e-bike is a banned hazardous substance, and we don't care what the manufacturer in China says, it's going to be recalled.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other catch. These bikes were distributed by Amazon and Walmart D2C. And so what is the responsibility of these two brands to foot the cost of the recall?
Right.
Right now, they're being let off the hook by CPSC, who is saying, okay, this is now a warning, rather than saying that by law, we're requiring that Amazon and Walmart recall these products and get them out of the marketplace.
I mean, there should be some accountability, in my opinion.
There was real teeth behind those regulations. I mean, if a company failed to do it, the company's executives were subject to punitive punishment, including up to and including jail.
Wow.
And obviously that's problematic when the executive that's subject to jail is in China. The long arm of our law is not that long. But the point is there were really, really meaningful penalties. And, if Amazon is found to be responsible for that recall, there are certainly Amazon executives within reach.
Or Walmart. They're both named in this particular situation. And under, again, the old 15B being viable for CPSC to use, they could have gone after those companies, at least those retailers, to pay for the recall. That's the problem now, is who's going to pay for the recall?
Right.
Well, this is voluntary. It's a warning. These damn things are dangerous. And CPSC knows it, the engineers do, but now they're being hamstrung by the current administration that won't let the full power of the Consumer Product Safety Act be used.
And the instructions relative to disposal of the defective battery pack are inadequate. Well, work with your local authorities. Okay. In the meantime, my garage burns down.
Yeah, there's not a lot of opportunity or not a lot of options there. Definitely something we'll keep our eye on and keep reporting on. I did want to get your thoughts on that, and glad I did. So we have some global conflict going on that I don't know if our listeners, our industry knows. There's potentially some increased freight costs and shipping disruptions that's going to flow down to retailers, ultimately consumers. So the Iran war cost will be passed to consumers. This is from BBC. So thoughts on how retailers might want to prepare, like what might happen with freight costs, any strategies that you'd recommend?
It's the article is based on an interview with the president of Maersk Lines, which is the second largest container freight line in the world. So this comes from one of the guys that's going to make this happen, which is they're going to pass cost on. We calculated this based on a 40-foot container of e-bikes, and you're talking $2 to $3 additional cost
Per unit.
based on what the article printed as the current surcharge, the premium charge is being assessed. Now, these are fuel costs. If you can't get through the Strait of Hormuz, or you can't get through the strait that would govern the Red Sea, or get to the Suez Canal, there is additional cost already being incurred on shipping, having to go longer routes. That gets passed on. Those are surcharges. I would suggest that retailers be very cautious about this. That they now contact their sources and ask, what do you see as additional freight costs being passed on? Be very mindful of surcharges on invoices that you didn't agree to, because this is going to happen. It's a matter of fact. And this whole idea that the war will be over and there'll still be surcharges because that strait could still be blocked And there are other choke points that have been pointed out, including I mentioned the Red Sea now is in play. All of these, from our standpoint in the bike industry, mean higher costs of the shipping to get the goods into our ports. And those are not absorbed and cannot be, quite frankly, with these other higher costs being incurred. So they're going to get passed on. And I think retailers have to be very mindful, be aware, ask, again, be in communication with suppliers and ask them what's coming because these higher freight costs are going to be in the pipe.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of everything seems to be going up right now, so makes sense there. Before we close out today, I did want to touch on our supplier manufacturer financial health. There's an article from Bicycle Retailer Industry News focused on Giant, Ideal, and Meridia report revenue declines in 2025. This is major global manufacturers reporting declining revenues, mixed profitability results. So we're not saying that they're not profitable, but definitely declining revenues. Just thoughts on our manufacturer supplier financial health? Any warning signs we want to be watching for, or anything that retailers might want to do to best position those relationships?
Watch the news articles on public companies. All three of those you mentioned are public and on the Taipei Exchange. So eventually, and you do get a different view from the American trade press than you do the European trade press, which tends to dig into the detail of what the financials say, as opposed to the American press that I think don't cover, they just simply don't cover it in depth. To
Mhm.
give you an idea of what you've said is revenues are down, profits are down. What does that mean? You get more of a feel for that in the European side, covering the same public statements. Um, Watch carefully the public companies, and then you're going to have to listen as carefully as you can to what's rumbling about the private companies, which are the bulk of the American brands. Trek is a private brand, Specialized as a private brand. They are not traded on the public exchanges. Uh, the large pond holdings in this country, Cannondale, Santa Cruz being two companies, that's private. There's no public disclosure or no public financial statements from those companies. So watch them carefully, listen carefully, talk to the reps, talk to the home office, make sure you've got a feel for what at least you're being told, and then weigh that carefully. Uh, my apprehension about the industry going forward is simply that fact. Uh, Tariffs have disrupted, these freight issues have disrupted the cash flow in the industry. They've disrupted liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
Any dealer knows what hoops they go through to get a commercial loan from a bank. That's what the brands, manufacturers, shippers, OEMs are all going through on a international level right now. In trying to buy product, they've got to finance it. And they're having trouble with both the interest rates and also the availability of cash. So a retailer can relate because the trouble you're going through is the trouble the big guys are having.
Yeah.
And so watch them carefully. I don't think that there are, you could probably name a less than a handful that are too big to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the rest of them, you're going to have to watch like a hawk just to be aware of shifts and changes. If there's changes in ownership, we just watched the Cell Group, which is not in the U.S. market, where KKR, which is the largest private equity holder of companies in the world, just gave up a sell, just gave it away, gave it back to the banks, lost 1.2 or $3 billion in the transaction from the investment they made. Now that doesn't affect the American brands, but it could happen to an American company.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to stay close because we are watching the suppliers, what's happening. Good news is we saw a lot of suppliers out with us at the Retailer Summit in Vegas, and those suppliers seem to be doing well. They're doubled down on their partnerships, relationships with retailers. So we just got to keep an eye on what's happening. So yeah, it's April 1st, 2026. Um, the next 30 days or so as we move forward. What's an item that we should be paying attention to for our listeners? What do you think? If we
Cash flow and profitability.
cash flow and profitability, yeah, I'm all about making a plan. Get a plan in place. Like that's where I'm at. Fred,
Regulatory developments.
oh,
Every,
regulatory. Yeah.
every dealer ought to be on the phone with their local and federal legislators, making sure that they understand the definitions and the real benefit and utility of our products, so that they don't get regulated out of existence.
All right, so we have a plan. We look at our cash flow and profitability, get on the phone with our municipalities, our decision makers, and make sure that you're advocating for safe products, that you understand what their concerns are. I guess Fred, bring us home. No pressure, Fred, but
Well, it would the industry has got to be, and if they're not human, a little numb. This is chaos. You're getting punched right and left. And at some point, you just kind of become more passive than you probably should be in business. So my concept would be, don't let it stop you from being aggressive. If you're not predator, you are prey.
oh,
And so I'm not saying overorder and come up with a plan that hopes for growth and you get out there and just wildly go after things, but don't let it take your edge off, because you don't want to be prey, I don't think. And so measured aggressiveness, maybe that's it. Try new things, keep on after it, and don't let them wear you down.
I like that. Fred, I can always rely on you to bring us home in a good way, right? Like we don't let's not be numb, and don't be worn down either. So great article. I don't know how you guys continue to do it every month, to put all the articles together and provide your analysis. It's really a fantastic resource that you bring forward to the industry. So listeners, if you're not signed up to get the reporter, it's absolutely free. Head over to humanpoweredsolutions.com. Sign up there. Just go right to blog. It's very easy to do. Thank you guys for all the help you do for our industry to translate policy, look at the data, give guidance to retailers and the industry at large that we can actually use. I'm consistently sharing your information with our P2 groups, with our retailers. I'm using it to formulate my Wednesday email strategy. So really appreciate you guys volunteering your time to show up each month and do this podcast. So thanks so much, Mike, Fred, Jay. Have a great afternoon. Thanks again.
Thanks for spending time with us on Bicycle Retail Radio. If this episode resonated with you, subscribe and share it with another retailer who could use the insight. Join us every week for new conversations and fresh perspectives to keep you ahead of the curve. The NBDA is constantly creating events, webinars, and resources built specifically for bicycle retailers. Check out what's coming up at nbda.com. Shout out to Francis Abbott for today's graphics. Interested in sponsoring an episode or know someone we should talk to? Head to nbda.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.